Hello there. All right, we've done it. That's it.
That's the intro. Today we're talking about studying with maladaptive daydreaming, and our guest today is Sinaeh, a grad student now, but we'll mostly be talking about university, I think.
Undergrad work, bachelor's, and all that. Welcome, Sinaeh.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You're in university too, aren't you? You were just saying.
Yes, I am. Oh no, sorry, my bad.
No, yeah, I was talking to you.
Ah, I see. Yes, I am also in university for software engineering. Sinaeh, what was your undergrad degree?
I had two actually. It was anthropology and biology, and now I'm in grad school for biology.
Anthropology was my undergrad major too.
I think I have read that somewhere, yes, and I was gonna ask you, but then I forgot at some point.
It was archaeology, but archaeology wasn't a complete degree that I could take at my university. I had to take anthropology and specialize in archaeology.
Yeah, same. I actually went in for archaeology, but then I changed it to more primatology focused.
Yeah, I almost did the same thing. I didn't, because when you're taking archaeology, but you have to take a bunch of other different kinds of anthropology courses, and then you take those ones about physical anthropology and evolutionary anthropology. Those are amazing classes, and I was like, wow, maybe that's what I want to do. I never did switch though.
That's how they get you.
Yeah, that's how they get you. They're so cool though.
Definitely.
So what did you end up studying? Not the classes themselves, but the material, right? Because when it comes to studying in university, depending on what you're doing, you have far different work depending on your major. For instance, as an engineering degree that I have, I'm basically a programmer. So I take my rear, I sit it down in a chair, and I sit in front of a screen for 40 hours and attempt to get a program to work. The difference here being that there is usually a correct answer, which is to get the computer to do what you want, and most everything else falls a little bit to the wayside comparatively. There's a lot of different theories, and there's a lot of different strategies you use to make the computer do what you want. But that's the kind of material that I go through, right? It's how you set up a computer system, all sorts of things like that. But it all has to do with technology. For yourself, in anthropology and biology, what do you do?
Yeah, I can sort of relate to it because now I do a lot of bioinformatics, but of course I didn't do this in college. So in college it was mostly, I had the anthropology side, which was writing a lot of essays all the time, which was really good for, being able to learn how to write. But then the biology side was a lot of intense exams and quizzes and lab work as well that I had to do. So I've kind of seen both the humanity and the humanity, is that what it's called? Humanities and I guess the science side of studying. So yeah, exams and essays.
Yeah, I think everyone's got to do a little bit of essays when they get to university.
An anthropology degree, that's how I have always described it. It's you're not learning anthropology, you're learning how to research and write papers.
Yep.
Because it's just too big. Anthropology is I think the definition we went by in my university was it's the study of man in all places at all times. You're never going to be able to learn all of that, so you have to learn how to research all of that.
And I'm sure you were at the library a lot, or at least you were on online materials, or you were doing that for a fair bit of time.
Yeah, definitely. And I was, in college pre-COVID times, so it was all in person. Good times.
And then the plague hit, so that was fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then I've been out of school for years now. I'm a little bit older, but you guys, you were in the thick of it. Were you still in your undergrad when COVID hit, Sinaeh?
No, so I'm in my 6th year of grad school. It's embarrassing. I should be finishing up soon. TM. But yeah, no, when I was in college, that was way before COVID, and actually most of grad school was also thankfully before COVID. So I had done all my field work. I do a lot of field work and lab work. So right when it hit, it was when I had to sit down and write and analyze all the time.
Hmm.
So in that case, I kind of got lucky compared to other people who had to switch up their projects completely.
Hmm.
And for college, I feel so bad because college is like when you discover who you are and you find your people, and it's all done over Zoom. It
Hmm.
must be terrible.
Well, here's the thing, right? That's something that's like a fairly that's like a fairly good point that you went over. We glossed over a little bit earlier. Is that you've been in university for a while, and I've been in university for a while. In fact, for my undergrad degree, all of my friends graduated either a year ago or 2 years ago when the plague hit. So I've still been sort of going through this, and it's taken me a while to get my degree. I have about 1 year left, most likely, assuming things don't fall apart at the seams as they did back in 2020. Um, but I've been in university for a while, and you said you have too. So when dealing with maladaptive daydreaming when going through university, right? How have you done it? How have you studied throughout uh, daydreaming or the temptation to daydream?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I've had years that were better and then years that were worse. And I will say that in college, I Um, I had a lot of issues in the beginning, but then later on, I was pretty good about daydreaming so much that I wouldn't call it as maladaptive as just immersive daydreaming.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm always thinking back on what made it change. But like now it's pretty bad again.
Hmm.
Or throughout grad school, it's been kind of a struggle. But I can list a few things that I know that helped me. So I don't know if you want me to do that. Sorry,
Oh,
am I
feel
answering the
free if you.
question?
Well, I mean, yeah. If you would like to explain what
What
helped
helped
you out,
me?
that would be perfect.
Yeah. So I think one thing, but I think this is pretty obvious to everyone who's already learned about maladaptive daydreaming. But I think when I realized my triggers, and I don't mean triggers like music and all those, which we're all familiar with, but more also my moods and feelings about a task. I found that if there is a deadline that's coming up, or in my case, I have a thing with emails,
Hmm.
um, recognizing that that's going to be a trigger and I'm going to feel anxious about it, which is really going to make me want to daydream. That has helped me to navigate um, when to study and also when to give myself a break, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
And
It does.
also realizing that the longer you put it off, the more intense the feeling becomes, and the more intense the urge to daydream becomes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I know myself in particular when going through my university work is I keep a pretty extensive mental tally of what needs to get done when and where. And the closer a deadline gets for myself, closer a deadline gets, that's when I get anxious for like assignments and things, especially group projects, because for my major, I'm at the point where most everything's done except all the group projects, all the upper classes, major specific group projects, because that's what a lot of these current classes are. Is you get into a class, they say, okay, here's the semester long project. You know this, you know how this is going to go. You get a group. You're going to do this for the full semester, and you're going to get a grade at the end and intermittently. So I say to myself, okay, cool. We have 4 clowns in our group. So we need to get the 4 clowns together and do all our work. And when the deadline for everything comes closer, some people are cooperative, some people are not. So that's when I myself get really anxious. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
when
can
it comes,
relate. Sorry.
no, you're good. You said you can relate.
Yeah. with like whenever it's not just you who's involved in the task, but collaborating with others, I
Hmm.
find that stresses me out quite a bit too.
Hmm. Yes. So that like and I think a lot of people can sympathize with the group project thing because there's always at least the one person who is making everything a real pain for sure. Um, so I think for a couple people out there, that might be something that makes them anxious when going through university.
That's I don't recall really doing any group projects at university level. Is that really common? I don't maybe it was just my university didn't do them much. I don't I mean, I remember sitting in groups to like discuss some things, but the
Hmm.
only group project that I think I ever did was extra credit. We didn't have to do it.
Hmm. The Here's the thing with a lot of group projects is the reason that at least that in our university the reason we're told we do them is for the sake of working in a team and learning to work in a team. So that's why we do them. Is that the same for you, Sanaya?
Yeah, I kind of see what you mean, Demmer. I also don't think I had a lot of group projects in anthropology, but it's definitely a thing in biology, with like lab tests and things like that. You have to get an experiment done and you are put in groups, and usually there's always like some group members that aren't as engaged, and it's quite stressful. Um, so yeah, I think maybe it's more in biology, or I guess like software engineering too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, I just said that we never did group projects, but I actually like now I'm remembering some, but they were mostly for like for digs and stuff because obviously you have to work with other people.
Oh
But
yeah.
like I mean, even in the lab, like the lab is mostly just the labeling stuff and gluing things together,
Hmm.
and but we did. Oh God, we were like we were at this church and graveyard, and we broke into groups to map it. We had to map the whole place, and there's oh shoot, what are those things called? The surveying equipment that you have to like line up with the marker so you know how much the ground rose or fell. I can't remember what they're
I
called.
forgot. I
Yeah,
forgot. But I know what
me
you
too.
mean.
Me too.
I there was like a one student who was really into that during my undergrads, who was always, standing by that instrument thing, or whatever that is called, to take the
Yes, they
measurements.
so we had in our group somebody who's really into the surveying part, but she would not stop touching it. And you can't touch it because it's so sensitive. It will move and screw up all your readings. And she just kept like trying to look through to get a reading and touching it. And I was losing my mind. Yeah, groups are fun.
Hmm.
Yep.
So yeah, those are always a bit of a difficulty for a lot of people. Now, mind you, I'm not an archaeologist. What you just said to me was completely foreign. But what I can say is there are a lot of group members like that who tend to have their quirks. So you got to work through them, which might make that kind of work a little bit easier for some of you out there who have trouble in groups. Working together in a team means you got to sort of compromise with some people, and some people don't compromise, and they're probably some of the tougher ones to deal with. I know that a lot of people that I've worked with in groups have usually been like we're all there for the same reason, and you know it too. It's to get an A, so we got to actually get the work done. So it's not often that you meet people who are just not willing to compromise to get that good grade because you're all there for the same reason. It's to do well and succeed. Uh, Theoretically, mind you. But when dealing with more physical stuff like that, I can see where like people's quirks tend to come out, especially when they care about the work that they do. There's a lot of different people in the world, so if you get really anxious, and that might be uh something that and now mind the reason I'm bringing this up is because Sanai, you mentioned that being nervous and sort of getting anxious is what causes you to daydream because you want to just sort of run away from the work, or at least that's the theory behind it. Because I know I really don't want to do some of the work that I have to do.
Yeah, but it's linked to whenever I've noticed it's involved with giving something to people, or what, how would I say this? Collaborations,
Hmm.
like not letting someone down. I have found that's especially like
Hmm.
sending an email that's important for some outcome to someone. I find,
And
oh, that's a huge, yeah, I get very triggered by that and procrastinated.
for me personally, is another sort of thing that is like not letting people down, right? Group projects are the main one.
Yeah.
Um, Also, uh, a lot of projects in software engineering or a fair few engineering degrees is you have a design or you make a design for whatever you need, because the point in engineering for a lot of people is you have a problem that needs solving. So you're designing something to fix that problem, whatever it is, software, hardware, robotics, things like that. You build something that solves a problem. So you find out what the problem is, if there's a problem at all, and then you start designing this solution to your problem. But the design is wrong, usually, first time around. It's never quite correct. So you have to iterate on it, which means there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of, you go from one place to another. You take the information that you've gained and you iterate on the process, because the first design is usually really bad, or at least you have a couple good ideas in there that need to be refined and improved upon until you have a project or a design or something that is either serviceable or works well enough and is ideally good, right? That's how this works. So that's why we work in teams, and since it's iterative, you keep giving things and getting things and giving things and getting things and making sure that your job is sort of, you do your job the best that you can so the product comes out good in the end. So when it comes to something like, a lot of people end up dealing with emails, right? You end up dealing with emails to send from one thing to another. But if you have a job, say there's a problem, and like they call it quality assurance, where you test you basically test your design, right? And if the tests go wrong, or the tests, you just don't have a good testing environment, or you don't do a lot of really good tests, and then there are a lot of problems arise. But the whole point is that you have a job, and if your job goes wrong, it's just like it's a responsibility that you have to, like, you have to do your job well, or that's what you've been given, right? For a fair few people, I think that sort of responsibility can be difficult to sort of handle, right? You just have that expectation that you need to do well. So where emails might be something super simple, that sort of responsibility, I think, is something else that might be difficult to deal with, I guess. But the point of me saying this, the whole point of me saying this specifically, is not just emails, but just sort of responsibility, like being given any sort of job that you want to do well or you don't want to fail, could also be pretty rough to deal with, and cause you to daydream a little bit. And I think a good way to deal with it is to know that humans aren't perfect, and sometimes you'll get really really testy bosses. Sometimes your manager will be a big pain in the rear, but at the end of the day, you're only human. So just do the best that you can, and try not to overdo it in worrying too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I will say, I'll add to this. The one thing that really helped me getting over this is, well, I'm a perfectionist,
Hmm.
but I just tell myself, just send it, like just do it.
Hmm.
Don't look at it too much, get it over with, which sounds like a very simple thing, but just kind of doing it and then move on. And then I find once I have done that, all the urges just disappear completely, and I'm like,
Hmm.
wait, what? Why was this such a big deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just kind of allowing yourself to not be perfect and
Hmm.
just do it and move on is my way.
It's one of those things where it's like, as a perfectionist, I
Yes.
have a I'm always kind of shooting for that A, but always end up getting that B, somehow. but the when shooting for an A, because a lot of people out there will most likely, for those still in school, your purpose there, a lot of what you do is shoot for the A. Some really care about the work that they do for sure, uh, but a lot of us fall into the category of, okay, I'm in school, I got to do school things, which means A, and then move on. Right? That's usually why a lot of us are there.
I found, and I wish I had known this sooner in my education, that it's okay to fail if you know how you failed. So I don't know if this would apply to STEM majors or
Mm-hmm.
software engineers or anything, but at least in the social sciences, there's some wiggle room there.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're writing papers or when you're doing research and everything falls apart
Mm-hmm.
and nothing comes out good or right,
Mm-hmm.
you can still get a good grade. If grades are what you're worried about,
Mm-hmm.
which, let's be real, are. But if you understand how you failed, if you include all your failures and limitations in
Mm-hmm.
your research and show how future research can do it better, that's
Mm-hmm.
something the professor will see, that you're understanding the concept, and um you won't necessarily get low marks for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's something important to point out, right? Which helps with anxiety a little bit. At least it helped with me when I realized it. And people will tell you this. You've probably heard this once before, that failure is the best teacher. The best teacher is the fact that you had an idea, or you did your best and you did not succeed. Um, which most people don't, or a lot of people, they would say, "God, I failed. That's awful." No, actually, that's probably a good thing, because you know what either you're lacking or you know where you can improve. So as long as you improve, and I'm not telling you you should fail unequivocally and you should just sit there and just continue to take L's over and over. It's fine to take a loss, but if you're going to take a loss, learn from it, because then you can take a success later on down the line. Failure is the best teacher, because no one wants to fail. No one wants to be the kid at the bottom of the class. At least I know that I wasn't exactly keen on that. I just know that a lot of people stress over being the best, or succeeding, but if you don't know where you need to improve, or you don't know what you need to do to get that A, but if you fail and you see the red marks on that test, or the red marks on your essay or your quiz, well, now you know what you need to work on. Now, that would make a lot of people nervous to see red, for a good reason. If you work at the stuff you failed at before, you usually do better next time, and it makes you, well, how do I put this, Dimmer? You can cut this out too if you'd like. But the purpose of me pointing this out is, failing often makes people, or it makes a lot of us, uh, it just makes us feel awful in general. But it's not all bad, and that's just kind of how improvements happen. It's how innovation happens. It's how things tend to get better. Um, so if failing is what makes you feel super nervous, uh, then failing is a good thing, so long as you work to make it better next time. And that's why, as Sinaeh said, just putting it forward and saying, "All right, this is it. This is it. I'm sending the email. It's not perfect. I'm sending the email, and it might be not great. It might look really foolish. It might look dumb, but I've sent it. I've turned in my assignment. I've turned in my quiz or my test or whatever, and whatever I get is what I get. There's nothing else I can do now. And you move on, right?
Yeah, and I will say too that failure, I feel, takes many forms. Like, it's not just failing on an exam, but also failing to do a task when you plan to on the day. And I have found this really trips me up. Like, if I wake up early in the morning and decide today I'm going to do this task that I did, whether that's, I don't know, turning in the essay that I had promised or whatever, and
Hmm.
then I end up daydreaming all day or something like that happens, which we all, I'm sure, have
Hmm.
been there. then I find that I get in this mindset that, well, I already failed this task, so I might as well just continue failing.
Mhm.
Like I just keep going and it becomes like this bad cycle. And I think it's really important to kind of recognize with yourself, hey, that's okay that you didn't, you know, complete this goal that you had in mind for today and you failed at it, but that's okay. You try again later and you kind of reset yourself every time and count these failures or these tries, but let them be a part of the process, so to speak. I
Mhm.
don't know if this makes sense, but yeah, like I find failure, this feeling of failure can happen in many ways, not just bad grades.
Mhm. Mhm.
Absolutely. That was a note I had made too while Q was talking, because
Mhm.
even the way I framed it earlier assumes that the person is trying to begin with.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people who never even get to that point. So I guess maybe we should move into like motivation, or not even just motivation, but like how to even do something so you have the opportunity to fail. If you don't do it, you
Mhm.
you
I
don't.
I see I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. The thing with not trying, right? Everybody is lazy. Every human does not want to do anything. Believe me. Um, but there is, we all still do things in one way or another. We get up in the morning and we go throughout our day as best we can, and then we fall asleep at night. Um, how do I put this? There's just many things to do. There's something to do all the time, but sometimes you just got to get up and do it. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sometimes you're just simply forced to get things done. And Dimmer, you were talking about Dimmer, Sinaeh, you guys were talking about getting just getting to the point where you have the opportunity to fail, which is, as I understand it, means you just give it a shot to begin with. Is that correct?
Yeah, like in my personal experience, just to give a little bit of context. So I do this thing. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's an MD thing or like some other issue that I have, or I don't know, maybe it's totally normal. I think there's a word for it. Can't remember what it is.
Mhm.
But when you have something big to do, or something that needs to be broken down into a lot of tasks, or just a lot of different tasks, when there's a lot there, a lot of something that you perceive as big or complex, you just don't do anything. You completely shut down, push it from your mind, and go have a bagel instead. Like,
Mhm.
That's me.
Mhm.
it's
That's
a real
me.
it's a thing that I do. Um, I guess I was kind of lucky in that another aspect of my personality is that, like, once I've put that off, by the time it comes up, by the time, like, if we're talking about like a research paper or something, I have enough latent anxiety to pull an all-nighter or two. Like, I have finished research papers that I have gotten A's on in one night.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't think anybody out there should bank on that happening.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
it's
was-
pretty.
I actually know this exact thing, Dimmer. Like mine also, I will put something off, and then one night I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna get it done. And I sit all night. But I will say this works well for essays, but it does not work well for a lot of other things. So, for
Mhm.
example, if you are doing coding, I have found that for this, you cannot just get it done the night before. You have to wait, and there's always going to be errors, and you're going to have to like change something. It has to be divided up, and it's been really dangerous for me to kind of switch to that kind of work mode compared to like before when I could do my all-nighter anthropology papers.
yeah.
So yeah, I will say that sometimes works, but it's not always yeah. And I
Oh
guess
no,
for
yeah.
exams too, that it's yeah, doing an all-nighter before an exam, it's usually
Cramming is
catastrophic.
rough. Cramming is
Yeah,
rough.
I did not
Yeah.
mean to give the impression that this is what people should do.
Mhm. No, yeah, no, I get what you're saying though. I myself wanted to mention you talked about having a gargantuan problem that is just so huge, and you just kind of sit down with your bagel and you say, man, that is a problem that I don't even know to where to begin. It's like a bowl of spaghetti. There's a lot there, and you're not entirely sure where to begin or where the problem starts or ends. Um, that's what you were saying before, right?
That is, yeah, exactly what I was saying. And it's not just with school. That's something
Hmm.
that I do in almost every aspect of my life. And
Hmm.
like I mean, it takes a long time to find something that will help with something like that. Something that's
Hmm.
just your natural reaction to stress.
Hmm.
Um, and beginning this helps, but you really have to internalize it. Starting is the hardest part of anything.
Hmm.
If you all you have to do all you have to do, like it's no big deal, but what you can push yourself to do, which might help, my tip for the day is only commit to like 10 minutes. Like you have this massive research paper or whatever or exam that is going to take hours, maybe days to prepare for.
Hmm.
Don't commit yourself to days, commit yourself to 10 minutes. And
Hmm.
because 10 minutes is doable, you can sit down for 10 minutes. You can push yourself for 10 minutes or even start smaller if you have to.
Hmm.
Because once you get started, that's the hardest part. Once you get started, then committing yourself to an extra 10 minutes or an extra half hour, it gets easier and easier and easier.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with this. And I also have a tip that kind of goes with it that might not work for everyone, but I found that if I I'm a big fan of to-do lists or like accomplishment lists, but making a list that breaks down that very big task into tiny, tiny tasks and then mixing in day-to-day tasks like taking a shower or just making this to-do list and then checking those off, it tricks my brain to feel like I've already started, if that makes sense. And then
Hmm.
the like some of the tasks on there can be like do 10 minutes on this and then check. And I find that if I trick myself to add those, like mixing in just daily tasks with that, I find, oh, okay, then I might as well just do this one as well and might as well do this one. And I never complete them, but at least I do a tiny bit of work every day when I kind of trick my brain with that.
Hmm. Yeah, those are really good methods on starting. Okay, so so let's continue for a little bit here. You've begun, as if that's easy to do, right? That's a pretty big kicker for a lot of people. I know that can be a pretty big kicker for me for sure. But you've started, right? You've committed 10 minutes a day, and then 10, then 12, then 15, and then 17, and then a little bit longer every single day. You've made your task list of things that you're doing during the day, sort of spreading out your work in between, but you've hit a wall, right? Right. Like, bear with me for a moment. You've hit a wall. Um, so you've started and you're going at this assignment, this problem, and you realize, man, this bowl of spaghetti is much larger than I thought it was. And you got to go here, here, and here to get this stuff done. And then you finally make your first your project gets done, or you make your first draft of your essay, and your teacher says, "Man, this is not it, chief. You got to work at it again." And you say, "I got to do this again." And you hit a point where you're like, "Man, this is just so much work. This is a ton of work." Um, this happens a lot to a lot of people, and it happens a lot in my field, where like projects or like assignments or just problems just get so large. They get so gargantuan, and you look at it, they get so big you can't look at it. You can't look at it as one person. It's too big for just you to look at. Um, so once you've sort of found that your project or your assignment's really big, um for some of us, just literally writing a page or a paragraph of work is huge. I can sympathize with that. I'm not exactly the greatest writer. So big does not necessarily mean making a car or building a rocket or anything fancy. If it's, it depends on you. A way that you can deal with that big bowl of spaghetti is to sort of break it down. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, into smaller pieces, right? Take it and you sort of cut it down into smaller chunks. That works better for lasagna. You can tell I'm in an Italian food mood today. But you take your big, your big problem, and you cut it down into smaller bits. Let's say you have a one-page essay, and you want to break it down, right? In simple terms, you start with the introduction, right? And you look at your introduction and say, man, even for the introduction to this one-page essay is a lot of researching I need to do, right? So a good way you might want to do it is you write down like a bubble diagram, and you need to research, or at the very least, let's say you need to research a couple topics, right? You sort of go down, you go down the line, and sort of break your topics that are fairly large into something that's a little bit smaller. But let's say you're making an essay on sort of the biology of trees, right? You take your tree essay, and you have three different parts of a tree, and you sort of break it down where you have the trunk of a tree, right? And then you have sort of the branches and leaves, and then you have the roots, right? um, and then for each of those, like, the leaves are built a specific way, and certain animals kind of eat the leaves of the tree. And for the trunk, you have maybe woodpeckers that sort of live in the tree, and there's certain bugs that live and work with the tree. The roots of a tree get nutrients from the soil, certain nutrients, and depending on the tree, they do different things with the soil. That is a way you could break down this one-page essay. Is you break down your essay about trees into three distinct parts: the branches, the trunk, and then the roots. And then you have an introduction that says, "This is I'm going to talk about a tree. This is the parts of the tree," and then you go down into those three specific parts, and then you have your conclusion saying, here's all the parts of the tree. I just talked about them. And then there's your essay, right? There's your one-page essay, right? That's the part of getting started. But once you get started, if you sort of break it down a little bit, a bit by bit, into smaller chunks, that is how you could take this big bowl of spaghetti and then break it down into something that is a little bit easier to digest, if that makes sense. Do I sound insane, Sinaeh? I think I do.
No, it sounds good. I
Okay.
think.
Um.
That's how I learned to write papers. So like you get your assignment and it is a 35-page paper on this topic. 35 pages sounds like a lot, but it's actually more like 4 or 5 multiple page essays. And essays go by that formula: your introduction, your points, and then just expand on your points, and then, sum it up. Just write that 4 times on the different things about this topic. And it's actually, as you get used to doing that, it's very formulaic. Writing essays, writing researcher papers, it's very formulaic. A research paper is just multiple essays tied together. And you can write an essay. And that's a and I don't know, the more you do it, the harder it gets to write short essays. Writing a 20-page paper very quickly becomes a lot easier than condensing everything you want to say in a 3-page essay.
Mm-hmm. And here's another point. Sanaya, does this have you experienced this where you can not just apply that to writing an essay, right? Okay, so because the hard part about this, like taking things and breaking it down, the hard part is, so you have it. So there's an example for essays, but you can apply that to a lot of different things. The hard part is applying it to other stuff, right? Like, for instance, Sanaya, if you've worked in teams before, in like a team.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's very similar to those points 1, 2, and 3. When you write, like teams are very similar, right? Each specific person has a job, and that's like point 1, 2, and 3, right? Like, for instance, Sanaya, when you went out and did your field work, was it solo, or did you work in groups?
In college, it was in groups. Yeah,
Okay.
all
What
my
did you
fieldwork.
do? What did you do for your field
Oh,
work?
yeah. I was so fortunate.
Mhm.
So, and actually, I will say, like when I said earlier, the few times when I didn't maladaptive daydream is whenever I was doing field work. It's like
Mhm.
my one thing that stops me. I did an archaeology dig, and I also went on like a primate field school.
Mhm.
And then in like on campus, we did several things. Like we would go to the zoo in groups and take notes of primate behavior, you know, like focal observations, I think they called it.
Mhm.
And for archaeology, I think there was like an archaeology center next to the university that we would also go to and like get group projects together, and we had to like sit down and try ArcGIS. I don't know if you remember this dimmer, but it's like
Mhm.
a program where you have to map everything out, and yeah, so that was all in groups always.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But your specific task, you had a specific task, a little bit different from your peers, right? When working in a group.
Yeah. um like you mean everyone had a different task? Sorry,
Yeah, everyone had a different task.
yeah, of course.
Mhm.
um Yeah, I mean, or well, not always. I guess you can also, yeah, yeah. I guess if you're turning in the project together, then you divide the tasks up. Yes.
Mhm. And the reason I point this out is you can apply the decomposition sort of process to like for instance, like you said, Sinaeh, teams. Each individual person is like point one, two, and three, and they're a little bit different, and each person has their specific job, if it makes sense. It's just a good way of solving problems, is to break things down.
Yeah. I guess breaking down a task, or like we break down an essay, what you said with the tree, that also
Hmm.
applies to other tasks that aren't essays, I
Hmm.
suppose. Like how one would do it in group projects.
Hmm.
So let me propose a scenario here.
Okay.
All right. You're in school or university or whatever. You want to do well.
Hmm.
You're in let's say a major that you like. And you know all this. Okay? You know how to write an essay. You know you need to get it done. You are sitting down to do it, but you're a maladaptive daydreamer and you just can't focus.
Oh boy.
What do you do?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't
It
it?
Hmm.
is, yeah.
What do you do? Well, I will start with this. If you end up daydreaming and you fail to start, then you have to be gentle with yourself and say, that's okay. Then I'll try again now when I've been thinking about it. Um,
Hmm.
because that's gonna happen. Like it's gonna happen. And I think that's really important to say. It sounds silly, but being okay with not making it the first time. The second thing I do is maybe, well, I feel like a lot of these tips are, I mean, it's things people already know, but
Hmm.
finding an accountability buddy can help a lot, I
Hmm.
think. It's not for everyone, but being able to do tasks together, because then you can't go daydream as well. Well, you can, but it's difficult. It's different.
Hmm.
And maybe if it's even over Zoom or something, but having someone that you set a timer and you say, okay, in the next 20 minutes, we're going to work on this task. I'm going to get this part of the paper done. And then, after that, I can do whatever I need.
Hmm. The one thing that I noticed when I was studying, and well, I guess I am still studying. Evidently, I'm holding my notebook right now, tossing it over there for a moment to make some space. One of the things I noticed was I daydream when if I can't focus, right? Now, not exactly for maladaptive daydreaming reasons, but literally any reason at all, I tend to slip into daydreaming. So, um, what I've started to sort of do if I can't focus, it's usually because either I don't have the energy, or I haven't eaten, or it's one thing or another. But I found myself really tired during the day, and something I've done to sort of help with that is one has been exercising, um, because exercising has helped me specifically with a bunch of different things. But more importantly for me, I have decided to eat fairly healthy foods, because there's a reason they call some foods brain foods. Um, and something that's important to note, right, is there's a difference. Like, I'll use a textbook as an analogy. There's there's a big difference in how you study, right? Like, it's better to study for, like, maybe let's say you have a paragraph in a book, right? It is everyone and their mother will say you need to study for 1 billion hours a day, every day of the week, and if you don't, you're a failure, and et cetera, et cetera. But think about it like this: let's say you're a super smart person or whatever, and you're going to med school, and you have, or like an engineering school or something, and you have a passage in a textbook. Here's the first one. The first one is you are awake and you've woken up for the day, and you just go and you read the 2 pages, and you read it very intently, and you understand what it's saying the first time. So you just read it once and you get what it says. Okay, that's the first one. You've sort of started your day and you've read the 2 pages. Now, here's the second. Here's the second example. You have these 2 pages, but you've been studying for 10 hours a day, and it's the end of the night, and you're like, I just got to get through these 2 pages, and then I'm done, or whatever. But I got to understand what the 2 pages say. So you read the 2 pages at the end of this very long 10-hour studying day, and you're like, man, my eyes went over the page, but I did not pay attention to anything that this said. So you read the 2 pages again, and you're like, man, I'm just not quite getting it. I'm not, I'll just gotta read it until I get it, right? And you read the 2 pages, and you just keep not getting it. And by the time you understand the material that you've read the 2 pages like 10 times, right? You've done 10 times the amount of work. That's 1,000% of you've worked 10 times harder to get the same amount of understanding of whatever material you're doing, whatever schoolwork you're doing, right? You also might have noticed that that's kind of not exactly very efficient, right? Why would you study 10 hours a day? So only to do 10 times the amount of work in the end, whereas you don't have to do that. Managing your time is important, is my point, right? Um, because not only will you learn better if you're more awake and you sort of have more, if you've eaten and you've had more energy in you, um, you don't have to work 10 times as hard. You don't have to work 10 hours a day. Imagine a world where you don't have to study 10 hours a day. You only have to study 1 hour a day. Now, granted, that 1 hour a day, you got to work real hard to understand all the material that you go through. But that's 9 hours you can dedicate to anything else, really, right? That's a lot of time that you could save doing that. It's a pretty big jump, and when you think of it that way, I mean, hey, you can do so much more in so little time, right? And I know there's a lot of people out there whose parents, I know my parents specifically, would be like, "You're only studying an hour a day? That's failure right there." And
Yeah. Oh, I have a point on that actually,
mhm.
if I may interrupt.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
so I feel there's this thing that you have to work from 9 to 5,
Mhm.
and I find it so hard to follow this kind of schedule, and it's such a taboo to say that you don't actually work those hours. I don't know
Mhm.
if anyone can relate to this, but I have found like being okay with myself to break that typical schedule and maybe take a break in the afternoon and then work after 5. I'm not saying
Mhm.
this works for everyone, but it's has helped me a lot. Also, I want to quickly add one more thing because I kind of lost my train of thought earlier. But back to the accountability thing. So I just want to say, like, it doesn't just have to be a person that you find. You can do accountability in many ways. Like, you can also tell yourself to go study somewhere in public, like in a library or somewhere, because I find that being around people helps me daydream less. This is not the case for everyone, I know, but at least in my case, whereas if I were to sit at home by my bed, I would be more likely to go daydream. And the other thing is, even just writing in the channel, in the MD server, I know there's like an accountability channel or any server. Hey, I'm gonna do this task today, XYZ, whatever task. And having this feeling that people have seen that you've written that in itself also really helps to get started. It sounds super silly, but it helps me. I do this too. And then you can update later and say, hey, I got it done, or hey, I didn't get it done, but I'm gonna try again. I think like that is really key, at least for me, to get started. Whenever I involve someone or I have people around me, it forces me to take me out of like this it takes me out of my room where I'm sitting on my bed and daydreaming all day. Yeah, I don't know if this helps. Sorry, that was a rant, but yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good information.
I was actually going to say that if nobody else had brought it up, studying in public helped me get through university a lot. And sure, friends catching sight of you and coming up to chit chat will be distracting. Random things going on around you will be distracting, but they will not be as distracting as being in your daydreaming space. Like, so
Yes.
yeah,
For
I would
sure.
study. I would study anywhere except my bedroom. The library, cafes, the university green, literally anywhere but at home. And then the accountability thing too. Yeah, definitely. It doesn't need to be like a dedicated person. Just say it out loud to the lunch lady, like
Yes.
you run into the gas station to pick up a soda or something, and the person at the counter is making small talk and they're like, oh, hey, having a good day? Reply with what you're gonna do. Like, yeah, good day. I gotta study later, but anybody, just say it out loud.
Yeah, but it certainly helps to get to just have anyone there, that you can say that you told them.
I think study method. I think a lot of people aren't taught how to
Yeah.
study properly, and that's a big issue. Like, yeah, they'll read the same thing over and over again. Um, and I'm not an expert in studying, but there are resources. You can look up like active reading and stuff. Never read without like
A purpose.
without a pen in your hand. Never read without a pencil in your hand. And look things up. Oh my God, Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. I read Harry Potter, and if you have read the books, you may or may not have noticed that Harry is often nonplussed. It's a word that the author likes to use to describe him. He's nonplussed a lot in the book, and I thought I knew what it meant, and I was wrong. The Harry Potter in my head is different than the Harry Potter character that she built because I misunderstood a word that she used to describe him. I thought I knew what it meant, so I never bothered to look it up. And it means the opposite of what I thought. I thought nonplussed meant like, like meh, like unimpressed, like okay. But it doesn't. It means like surprised and confused. Like he's the wrong character in my head than what he was written to be because I'd never bothered to look up that word. Look things up as you're going is what I'm trying to get at. Look into active reading, active note taking. Those will help.
Yes, and rewriting helps too, and also teaching it to someone else.
Yes, and these are all things that will keep the daydreaming down while you're doing it because you're being actively engaged in what you are doing.
Teaching somebody else, and this might sound strange, but also teaching yourself. And the way that what I mean is you've looked at the information and you've written it down, and then take the information that you've written down, the notes that you've written down, and then write it down again by paraphrasing it as you best understand it. Because while you can break down a problem, if you break down a problem and then put, or if you break down the information and then you put the information back together, then you can compare, right? It's like, what's the information I read and what's the information I understand? That's another way you can sort of actively engage in the information that you're learning, if that makes sense. That makes sense. Makes
It
sense.
does, yeah.
There's a lot of different ways you can study. Usually the ones that are, quote, bad ways to study are ones where you usually don't really care about the information. You can just kind of let it pass you by. For a lot of people, math is difficult, and I don't blame them, because math was just created to sell more math. That's what I was told. But learning math and sort of learning to do it requires a lot of effort. And like you said before, Sinaeh, like you said before, Dimmer, teaching someone math certainly helps for sure. But a lot of these sort of active learning uh, and decomposition strategies will certainly help in math, because when did any of math make sense? How do I put this? It doesn't make sense, really. Like, it's very, very strange. It's just so foreign when you first learn about it. Like dividing a fraction, and then you got to flip it around and then put it up, like algebra, calculus. It's just very strange. So these sorts of active learning methods would certainly help, because we've used examples like writing essays, like just looking into history and things like that. That's a little bit more intuitive. Math is not, but these kinds of methods are still, you can still use it to learn math for sure. In particular, looking how math problems are done and trying to follow step by step how they did the math problems, or an example of how they did how the math problem was done, and sort of putting it together piece by piece, because you have to, you really kind of got to put together all the pieces in math. Just breaking it down isn't enough.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because that's how I learned art.
Yeah,
You
I can't do art. I wish I could do art. I can't do art. It doesn't make sense to me. But
But it could, because it's exactly that. That's how we learned. You sit down and you look at the masters, and you can, not just their finished pieces, but there are unfinished pieces, and there are studies. You look at their studies a lot, where you can see them erasing things and moving lines around, and you look at it and you copy it, and you can see their method, and you can see when they went wrong and where they corrected themselves, and then when you're trying to draw your own thing, you go through and you move lines around, you correct, and you
mm,
and you look at what's there. People, you don't look at the whole, you don't draw the whole thing. You look at the form and the shape and the shade, and you draw. I don't know how to describe it. You draw what is, I was an art minor. What
mhm,
is
mhm,
there? You don't draw what you think you see. Your brain is lying to you. Never draw what you think you see. Draw what you actually see by
mhm.
breaking it down into smaller things. And that sounds like exactly how you just described trying to figure out mathematics.
There's a lot of different ways you can get to an answer, but why and how, for sure, makes things significantly easier. If you ask that a lot when studying, and I know we haven't talked too much about maladaptive daydreaming, but the reason we're sort of going over study methods is because if you're actively engaging in the material, if you're and I'm sure you've heard that before, if you're actively engaging what you're learning or trying to learn or need to learn, your brain is more focused on the schoolwork, right? And if your brain is focused on the homework, it doesn't have time to focus on your daydreams, right? When it comes to tricking your brain into not daydreaming, uh, engaging in your work, engaging in your homework, your material, whatever you're learning, is a spectacular way to keep it busy. If you throw yourself into the schoolwork and you sort of immerse yourself in it, you can do your schoolwork for less time and get more done, if that makes sense. you can do more in less time, and it seems like a very foreign concept to a lot of people. I know when I first heard that, it's like it was super strange to me because I always thought you had to take ages to get anything done, but you don't. You just kind of got to be a little bit smart with it, and that does include putting in a ton of effort, a whole ton of effort into studying for sure, assignments for sure.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. Like we haven't really mentioned maladaptive daydreaming a lot in this, but that's because active is the word of the day. That is what maladaptive daydreamers need. So like um learning active studying methods, being active in recognizing your triggers and getting yourself out of them by studying in public, or by like recognizing your moods, to call back to like our very first tip.
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
Being active in bettering your overall health. University students never fucking sleep. Like, like go to bed, go to bed, it's okay. Eat a little better.
And 8
um
hours for a reason. Staying up all night doesn't help. Take it from me. Staying up till
yeah, yeah.
5 a.m. does not help. Uh,
Yeah.
have a consistent sleep schedule. Do any of us know what that is? No, but I swear it's
Yeah,
real. I
it's real.
swear it's
Do
real.
it. Yeah.
And if you have one, it will certainly help you out in feeling a little bit better.
It does, but I will say too, I don't know with you guys, but when my daydreaming is really bad, I completely neglect all of that. And
Hmm.
and and usually it starts with a task that wasn't done, and then it just ends up being just things for myself that get added because that initial task wasn't done. So then I feel, well, then I can't do any of the tasks.
Hmm.
So even like, I don't know, taking a shower or eating properly. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's definitely good to eat, and you should, but I also think it's common to sometimes neglect it because of that one thing that is looming above
Hmm.
you.
Yeah,
Um,
it's extremely common. I think, especially among young people who have wild routines. Classes at different times every day, and their first experience usually away from home, and it's just
It's a
yeah,
lot. I'm
it's a
telling you,
lot.
it's a
Yeah,
lot. Consistency is king, but believe me, that never quite ends up panning out.
yeah.
It's just difficult. That's it, like time management. Let me tell you something. Here, I shouldn't. It'll make a lot of people mad me saying this, but time management is 9 times out of 10 more important than getting an A. And the reason why is because if you're good at managing time, then you can manage the amount of work you need to do to get your assignments done, if that makes sense, right? There is 24 hours a day, 7 days in a week. If you can manage that time well, then everything comes afterwards, right? And it's harder than school, by the way. Let me tell you, uh,
yeah.
by a large margin.
That is really good advice. I completely agree with this. It's
Mm,
more important than the grades, but the grades will come with that.
mhm,
Um, because instead of stressing over an exam all day and going all over the place,
mhm,
allowing yourself to get up and eat and then study a little, but then go take a walk or do something else, and then it appears as if you're working less time on what you need to work on, but that management of time makes you able to work at least a little bit every day. And really, that's also what's gonna, having that skill set is what matters after college, because that's
mhm,
all it's about. The grades will no longer matter after college.
mhm. Oh yeah.
It's about time management, and if you don't learn that skill, it's really really hard. It's yeah.
Okay, and that's all hunky dory, right? But let's look at the other side of that coin, right? Let's turn around and see what happens if you don't have good time management skills, right? Um, but let's say you don't really have good time management skills. Eventually you realize that you think to yourself, man, there's never enough time in the day. And you just go that 10 hours studying, and then suddenly that's 10 hours of the day gone. What do you do? Let's say you want to get 8 hours of sleep. That's 18 hours out of the day gone. And then you'll see you have an hour for like three different classes. right? The 18 hours plus 3, that's 21 hours. You have 3 hours to do literally anything, and those 3 hours are usually taken up by commuting to and from school or work or whatever, and then you have to make food, and sometimes you don't have enough time to make food in those like 2.5 hours, or in that like those 2 hours. If you can't make food, you just end up commuting to like a fast food place, and that becomes your routine. You eat fast food, you overstudy, you maybe get 8 hours of sleep. That's what a lot of people do, and it's not uncommon for sure. It's very common, and eventually you just sort of get into that routine where you just feel awful all the time.
Yeah. So my experience was a little different. Like uh, 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 we've been talking a lot about the amount of time that people spend studying and trying to get things done and not being able to accomplish them. But I want to go back to the other, because I think that only apply to like half the MDers. I think the other half are more like me, where those
Mm,
10 hours were not spent trying to study. They were spent not even getting out of bed to start the day.
mhm,
And and then there's never there's never enough time in the day, not because it's filled with things, but because it's filled with literally nothing but daydreaming.
mhm,
um and there is no fix for that. No quick fix. There is no band-aid that will help you get past that. So like you were talking about, making improvements in your life, just sleeping a bit more, eating a bit more, trying not to get sucked into these cycles. And it's the same with not just with your overall health, but with maladaptive daydreaming. Like, maladaptive daydreaming is so intrinsic to us. It's such a big part of who we are that it really takes changes in your entire life to get a handle on it. You cannot, you can probably, okay, so like you have an exam coming up and you can't study because your MD is acting up and it's really bad. So you find one of our communities, and yeah, people will give you some band-aids. They'll be like, "Oh, explain the material to your characters." Or study in public. That's when I tell people a lot, like, get out of your room, go sit on the university green, study there. It will help. But those will only help get you through one assignment, and who knows if they'll even help at all. Like, what you have to, you really do, just for your long-term health and success in university or in anything, is get a handle on your daydreaming. And that's not going to come overnight. That's going to take a little bit of work, which leads me to my final point
mhm,
on this topic, which is, we're talking specifically about university students or college students. So I am sorry, high
mhm,
school students, this might not apply to you. Most campuses have resources. Use them. Talk to your advisor, make friends with your professors, sit in the front row,
mhm,
and look into their counseling services. They will usually offer some for free, and the ones that aren't free are at a discounted student rate. You are paying, especially if you're American, a buttload of money for this university. Wring every drop of worth you can get out of it and use every single resource at your disposal.
mhm. Yeah. When it comes to the counselor specifically, we all know we all know how counselors and how counselors can be when it comes to talking about maladaptive daydreaming. But it is still worth a shot. It's still worth a shot to talk to them.
Yeah, you don't
Um,
even have to talk about the MD,
mm,
they're used to hearing about, study problems. There's other things that they can help you with.
mm.
Um, but whatever, just use them. They're available.
And in a lot of cases, just having someone to listen to is enough. When it comes to sort of like studying and having trouble sleeping and things like that. When the plague came around in 2020, that was for sure something that going to counseling and talking to those counselors would certainly, like, that kind of stuff. They will certainly help with that. And since the plague still, like, it's not, we're like, for us in the United States, we're not under quarantine like we used to be, but it's still affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways even today. So it's just nice to talk to someone about it. And I know for a fact that, at least on my campus, that there are, like, most of the students there will understand if like classmates in particular. Here's an example. My algorithm analysis class. I literally at the end of the class said out loud after the teacher left while I was in my seat. I said, "This is a catastrophe," and 4 or 5 other guys, the other people around me were like, "Yep, this is a mess." they 100% understood, because you're all there for the same reasons. You're all there going through the same stuff, and everybody's still dreading that test. Everybody's still trying to get that assignment done, and everybody knows, because you're all in the same boat together. So that for sure helps.
I agree with everything that's being said.
Do you have
Yeah,
anything to add in particular, Sinaeh? We're kind of taking the floor here.
I think it's a really, really good point to seek out counselors. I also did this in college. Exactly what Dimmer said.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching or listening to Parallel Lives. You can find us on a bunch of different places, like YouTube, Anchor, Spotify. We got Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, I believe. Is that correct?
I have no idea. Anchor publishes them all everywhere for me.
Absolutely. We YouTube, Anchor, and it posted on Spotify, Apple, Google, Pocket Cast. You can join our Discord and our subreddit, r/maladaptive dreaming. Not maladaptive daydreaming, maladaptive dreaming. We will see you in 2 weeks. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and you can save us to a playlist if you're on Spotify or Apple. Download it. Have a blast. We'll see you in 2 weeks, everybody.
Yay!
Not gonna say anything, Dimmer? Not gonna be like, bye, guys.
Great job, Q.